So my special guest is John DeSouza, XMan. The nickname stuck with him as he was an FBI special agent for over 20 years and collected the real-life X-File. John DeSouza unravels mysteries that elude investigators restricted to the purely natural world. The truth of the paranormal reveals itself to the author through his supernatural experiences and those innumerable others across many professional fields. And he has written two books. One is The Para-Investigators, True Tales and Concepts of Supernaturally Gifted Investigator, and his latest book, The Extra Dimensionals, True Tales and Concepts of Alien Visitors. And it is my great pleasure to have you hear from John Souza, and being my synchronistic luck, I just happened to have an ex-FBI agent on who is on the show the day after Mr. Comey was fired. Does that put a smile on your face, John?
So yes, thank you, William. Yes, I do have a smile on my face. Definitely, also for not just for that, but also for being on with you guys, with you and with Star and Joy. It really is. It's a lot of fun for me, and very great honor to be on with you guys. Yes, it's really something that this was. It was pretty long overdue, Mr. Comey out of that position. I'll tell you, the rank and file of the FBI is what I have experience with. And I can't tell you, I've never seen so many congratulatory messages going back and forth between rank and file FBI agents as what I saw last night. A lot of people very happy, mostly because what he did was he took the FBI out of its function. He basically politicized them into a political organization, and the FBI is a great organization when they fulfill their functions. That really disables the organization from fulfilling their primary functions, the things they should be doing.
And I asked you if you were happy about it. I was at a restaurant last night, and across the CNN banner said that Comey was fired. And I told my friend Sue, this is the happiest I've been since Trump got elected, because this really is a thumbs up to making us a better place.
Skipping over this whole Comey thing and going into your background and your history, for the listeners, give us a little brief recap, because in the intro you talked, it was like the real X-Files and such, and I'm a really big X-Files fan, and I think everything is possible out there. So what can you tell us about the X-Men part of your
Sure.
name? Yeah.
Oh, sure. Well, for your listeners, for your audience, I'm John DeSouza. I was in the FBI as a special agent investigator for over 20 years. And during that time, I worked mostly counterterrorism, big counterterrorism cases, violent crime cases, a lot of which are publicly known by most people. But during that time, I also was involved with cases that involved the paranormal. And also during that time, we had in the 90s, we had the show, The X-Files start. Mm-hmm. And I was a huge fan of that show. And I loved that show, and it's pretty well known. And there was a conflict in the FBI regarding the show soon after they started airing. As people know, I think everyone will know what the X-Files was. It was a story of deep paranormal stories of things happening in American society. And what happened is the higher ups in the FBI became concerned that some of the stories in the X-Files and procedures, some of the FBI procedures were taken from real life. And so they got in contact with the creator of the X-Files, Chris Carter. And Chris Carter talks about this today. He says he thought the FBI was going to shut him down because the higher-ups got in touch with him, and they told him that they needed to know where was he getting his information from. Officially, they had to say, it was FBI procedures that he was using very accurately, so we wanted to know. Also, I was questioned at the time if I was having any contact with Chris Carter, and I was able to say no, but the rumors on that got around real fast, and after that, I picked up the nickname X-File Man, or X-Man for short. And even though I was able to tell them I was not giving information. And I believe that he said he was able to say that he was getting consultations from retired FBI agents. And then they left it at that. They kind of called it a tie because they didn't want to say specifically what stories were taken from real life FBI files. And he wasn't going to volunteer that either. So they kind of just called it a tie and went back to their corners, and he was able to go on with the show. So that's how I originally got the nickname XMan. I was told actually that I was demoted from G-Man to X-Man at that time, so unfortunately. So, but regardless, that's how that originally came about. And my first I had many experiences of paranormal in law enforcement. The first great one is in the beginning of my book, The Para Investigators, True Tales and Concepts of Supernaturally Gifted Investigators. In that, I write about the first great experience that many of us had of the paranormal in law enforcement, which was the Indigo kids of 9/11, and that was these little kids all over the country that were reported into intelligence centers, into FBI centers and task forces after 9/11 happened. And the reason these kids were reported in was because they were kids that, for instance, there was a little girl who was on a playground, and she was playing by her in the weeks before 9/11 happened. She was just playing by herself on the playground, and a teacher, walked up to her and said, "Are you okay, sweetheart? Are you all right?" And she was like, "Yes, I'm just thinking. I'm fine." And the teacher goes to walk away, and the little girl pulls on her skirt violently and says, "Tomorrow, make sure you stay away from tall buildings, because tall buildings sometimes fall down, and they fall on people." And so the teacher walked away. It was another little boy, for instance. He was doing these finger paintings, and he made these 2 tall buildings. And the teacher comes over and sees him, his painting. And this is actually on the trailer on my Facebook. I actually have a trailer that depicts this. He makes this beautiful painting of 2 tall towers. And she comes over and says, "Wow, that's really beautiful, those 2 tall buildings. And it looks like there's these, like the whole buildings are glowing. And it also looks like these angels are flying away from the buildings. Where are they flying to?" And the little boy says, "Those buildings aren't glowing, they're on fire." And then he says, those angels, those aren't angels, those are people, and those are not wings. And they are on fire also, and they're jumping out of the buildings." And again, the teacher walks away from him and just figures it's too much sugar or something. Another little boy woke up screaming on the school bus because he didn't get any sleep the night before. And he is screaming about people jumping out of buildings on fire and just in a terror. And the kid just wakes up on the school bus yelling out. So all of these instances were reported, and these things happened all over the country, both and FBI agents and police officers both had to cover these things and had to talk to these little kids. And it was, no matter how uncomfortable it was for them, these kids had to be talked to. And because after 9/11, there was the big See Anything, Say Something campaign. And these kids had to be interviewed for any possible connection to terrorism. It's amazing, but it actually happened, and it had to happen. And these cases happened all over the country. And that was, for a lot of law enforcement officers, that was their first great exposure to something paranormal happening, because every single one of these cases was washed out, as we say, with no connection to terrorism. It was just little kids that had these, and we call them the Indigo kids of 9/11, because they had these genuine paranormal experiences that predictive of 9/11.
So, John, did that send a rift through the force? Like, no pun intended, but all pun intended. To the, you know what I'm saying, though. I mean, it had, to warp everybody's brain just a bit, to break them out of the concreteness of what life is constructed for us to be to where we are, and everything's fluid. And like these kids obviously have no connection to terrorism, but they know.
And in every one of and these investigations, for instance, the ones that involve the Indigo kids of 9/11, in every one of these cases, the final conclusion to each one of these, and we call them just leads, not necessarily cases, but every one of these were simply closed with no connection to terrorism. That was the status. And then the file was closed and put away forever. And they were hoping nobody would ever talk about them ever again. And, but that's not going to happen because of what I just said. Every single law enforcement officer that dealt with that was changed forever. And so, yeah, they are going to talk about it in the future. But yeah, unfortunately, no, nobody has, and those files were not handed over to anybody for psychic study or for follow-up in the metaphysical realm. No, nothing like that ever happened. And it's too bad. It's a really lost opportunity.
I listened to one interview where someone asked you, the FBI success is where they find a mentally not so intact person and they supply him with the materials they need so that they can bust him and make the FBI look brighter.
Oh, you noticed those cases, huh?
Yeah, and here's one that I think you might have missed. You did mention the 1993 World Trade Center bombing as 4 Islamics that pulled that off. Now,
well, that were involved with it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what about the gentleman that recorded his FBI handler and asked him, did they want to use the real bomb or were they going to give him the fake material? And the gentleman he's speaking to, who was identified as an FBI agent, told him, no, we're going just the way it is. Now, the story goes that he disappeared because he was paid off, and then they busted the blind sheikh for one that just recently died in prison. So, I could see that as a false flag as well. I don't know if you ever heard of the gentleman who recorded his FBI handlers and them telling him, no, go with the package the way it is, which was the live bomb.
No, so, I never heard of that, but I'll tell you, I don't believe for 1 second that 4 Islamic radicals pulled off the 9/11 attacks on their own. I don't believe that for 1 second.
And I want to officially thank you for an exceptional
great show, John.
And we'll have you back anytime you're free. And I want to thank you once again so much, John, Mr. John DeSouza.
Thanks, guys. A great pleasure for me. Thank you so much.